1, go. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending Energy Careers 2020 and today's session, Diversity in Energy. My name is Paula Glover, and I'm the President and CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. I will be your host and your moderator for today's program. Before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. For those of us new to this world of virtual meetings, our panelists and I have pre-recorded this session, but we will be joining you live to answer questions in the chat box. So feel free at any time to put your questions in the chat box and we will be there to respond. We are eager to engage with you. In just a moment, you're going to get to learn a little bit more about our panelists, but first I want to tell you about them. And you can, and you can read more about them in the speaker bio tab to the right of your screen. So let me just share with you who our panelists are today. We have with us Ms. Ileana Rentz from Florida Power and Light, Ms. Kenisha Barnes from Duke Energy, Mr. Hassan Coco from Mears Construction, Ms. Vic Win from Oklahoma Gas and Electric, and the Honorable James Campos from the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the U.S. Department of Energy. Welcome, everybody. So first, I want to start with you, Vic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career in energy, and what you're doing now?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Paula, for the introduction. So I'm Vic Win, and I am a Vietnamese American. And like Paula said, I currently work at Oklahoma Gas and Electric. So we are an electric utility company that covers most of Oklahoma and part of Arkansas. So how I find myself in this industry was 5 years ago. I actually was looking for an analytics job because essentially that's what I do. And so I joined OGE and then worked my way up, and now I'm essentially leading the Analytics Center of Excellence. And our mission is to create an ecosystem to inspire analysts to be their best.
Thank you, Vic. Hassan, I know you have an interesting story. I wonder if you might share a little bit about yourself with us, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and thank you, Ms. Paula, for having me on this. My name is Hassan Kolko. I work with Mears in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been working with the company for like over 2 years. I'm a foreman in service gas line, and I've only been working with in gas and natural gas with Mears. Yeah, and since I immigrated to the U.S. from the Middle East. I've always want to be in a gas industry because I'm so curious to know like how gas moves from how the gas move and from transmission line to distribution line all the way to consumer.
Thank you, Hassan. Ileana, would you please share with us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be at Florida Power and Light NextEra?
Thank you, Paula, and good afternoon to the panelists and to everybody out there. So my journey started with Florida Power and Light about 15 years ago, following my career with the military. I served in the U.S. Army, obviously immigrated to this country when I was just a young child. I was raised in Miami, Florida, and was following my military career. I was called to the utility space, right? And I've had a really amazing journey with Florida Power and Light, and I'm currently overseeing all of vegetation management for the utility, the regulated utility, as well as all of our unregulated assets in 37 states and Canada.
Thank you. So nice to have you with us. Kenisha, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Duke?
All right. Hello, Paula. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenisha Barnes, and I am, as Paula mentioned, with Duke Energy, Carolinas. I'm here in North Carolina. I actually am a regulatory affairs manager. interesting. I started with the company actually 22 years ago in our call center, helping our wonderful customers. So I've had an interesting journey from our call center to my current role as a regulatory affairs manager, where I oversee regulatory matters specifically for Duke Energy Carolinas here in North Carolina, including escalated customer complaints and/or along with research and emerging regulatory issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kenisha. I think it's awesome, and I'm so thrilled to have you guys as panelists. And I think it's interesting that none of you said that you were electrical engineers or civil engineers or mechanical engineers. And typically people think that you have to be an engineer to be in this industry. I am also not an engineer, so I'm really excited to hear from all of you about the work that you're doing. And the success that you've all clearly had, even though you are an engineer. So not that I wanted to sway people from being an engineer, but yay, for those of us who aren't, we can still do well. Director Campos, why don't you share with us two things? First, how you came to be at the Department of Energy in the role that you're in now, but also why don't you set the context for us a little bit about why you think diversity in this business is so important?
Well, thank you, Paula, for that question and for this great panel. And just like you, Paula, and I suppose the rest of the panel, I am too not an engineer. So, but to your question, and diversity is critical to the energy industry. I think on this panel we know this, but to those who are listening, it's vital to the country's security. It's vital to our viability and sustainability for our generations to come. The character of our country is rapidly changing. As many of you know, K through 12, majority minority this year, our country by 2044, majority minority, and we don't have enough individuals entering the workspace in the various different energy sectors. We need to do a much better job in order to fill those jobs, to create the pipelines necessary, and to also promote and to make aware just how great these jobs really are, just how exciting these jobs are, how diverse these jobs are. We're not doing that good enough, obviously, and we need to do a better job with minority communities, women, and even individuals leaving the military to come in to this great industry. So it's so vital for us to be involved in all aspects of the energy industry and the promotion of it and exactly what and how important it is to our society. Our economy is energy. It's what propels our country moving forward. It's what's going to take us to the Mars, the moon. It's what's going to keep us having the society and life that we all desire. So it's so vital, and it's so very much important to maintain and to increase the participation of minorities.
Thank you, Director Campos. So appreciate that. I'm going to move back to Ileana, and I want to ask you actually a two-part question, Ileana. The first is, what is vegetation management? You talked a little bit about that's what you do. And so for those folks out watching who may not know what vegetation management is, what is that? What do you do?
That's actually a really good question. So when we look at our power lines, right, our infrastructure, and we see the beautiful green trees that grow in and around our power lines, trees and power line organically compatible, right? So we have cycles that we work with our public service commissions on what that scope is, how much we trim it to keep it away from the power lines, as well as how frequent we do it. With regard to the bulk electric system or the transmission grid, the big poles and wires that we see out in beautiful pastures as we're driving through major interstates throughout the country. In those cases, there's, our regulatory bodies that govern the utility industry actually have standards and compliance requirements relative to trees encroaching or growing into the power lines that can cause significant fines and impact to the brand and reputation of the companies. Maintaining the trees that are so beautiful and belong to our customers is an integral part of day-to-day electric service reliability, and also protecting our national infrastructure from natural disasters, hurricanes, fires, et cetera.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you a second question, Ileana, since I have you. You talked about in your introduction that you were in the Army and then you found yourself in utility space, or it sounded like you actually even chose the utility space after you left the service. So first, obviously, thank you so much for your service. It's always important, I think, for us to recognize that contribution. But in the time that I've spent in this industry, there are a lot of people who come out of uniform and then move into the utility industry. And I wondered if you could share with us, what is the connecting point from being in the service, whether it's the Army, Navy, any of the services, into moving into the utility business? Because there's obviously a skill transfer there that makes it a nice transition.
I would say it's almost a very organic transition, right? The utility space is a space of service, right? We serve our customers. We're there for our customers when they're a national infrastructure. We are part of national security, right? Without electricity, everything stops. The way you look at how your natural utility companies are set up and organized, the organizational structures are also much like what you come from in the military. You have your field workers, you have your frontline supervisors, and then you have management escalating through there. And when it comes to anything impacting one of our sister companies throughout the nation, the one thing that we are amazing at is that mutual assistance, whereby we all rally together and send our employees out to help others restore normalcy to their communities. So that is what really makes this industry very special.
Thank you. Hassan, in your introduction, you mentioned a little bit that you were always really very much interested in natural gas and pipelines and how gas was moving from place to place. And so I wondered if you might share with us a little bit more about that curiosity. Oftentimes we think that people don't really care about that part of the business and that customers really don't have any interest. And so share with us, especially for those who are watching, how did you gain such an interest in that and that led you to pursue this career?
Well, I've always worked in commercial construction, but it has nothing to do with utilities. But if you look at it, it's actually related to each other: construction, commercial construction, and utilities in general. But I've never done utilities. So what I want to do, I was like, I need to expand my career and add more skills, which is to look for gas line, power line, and just see like how they run and how they get to consumer as well. Mm-hmm. So that's what brings me in, brings the curiosity to me, that I just want to know how things goes, especially when I immigrated to the US. That's where actually natural gas is. Mm-hmm. Because where I came from, actually, they don't use natural gas in home. They just use it for vehicles. So I always want to know like how it gets to the customers. And that's when I started looking for a job I started looking for a job here in the US. And that's when I found Mears Construction in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's when I was actually sent to Lineman College for the training program. It's natural gas distribution training program. That's when I went to for the training. And I like the way the training program, the way they structured the program, that's where you actually spend half the day in a classroom and half the day in a field. And that's actually made the program useful to what we do. And it's very interesting that, to me, is like, how do you get gas in a pipeline all the way to the customer?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Vic, when you gave your introduction, you started by saying that you were really interested in doing analytics And so you found yourself that this was a perfect kind of place for you, OG&E, because you're running now, right? Or you're the managing the Analytics Center for Excellence. I think that's what it's called. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But would you tell us a little bit more about what does analytics in the oil and gas company look like, or gas and electric company, excuse me, look like? What does that mean when you say analytics? What are you analyzing?
Gotcha. So essentially, for those who, don't have a lot of knowledge about data and analytics. So we believe that data is such a critical capability now for companies to be successful. And in the utility space, or even in the energy industry, there's just a ton of data that you can glean insight from. So specifically in the public utility business, we have, say, meter data, like how is the customer is using electricity, even the electrification of cars now, right? Or there's a lot of things that are trying to electrifying. And so we can do a lot of user research, market research to see if there is possibility to say expand in that space. I know specifically, in our company, we looked at data and we said, okay, if we're going to offer electric stations, are there going to be customer that's willing to adopt that? So those are type of analytics that we run, and also talking about what Ileana was saying about the reliability. So we look at reliability data to see if or if our system has a good uptime or good downtime and things like that. So there's a lot of data that we can look at.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that explanation. Ms. Kenisha, you started out with your introduction talking about you started out in the call center or working with customers. I started out my career in the business office taking customer payments. So I totally understand what that start is. I wondered if you could talk a little bit, though, about regulatory affairs and also the interaction. How did working with customers help you even maybe in your role in regulatory affairs? But what is regulatory affairs? Why is that job needed? And kind of what do you do?
Yeah, I'll be glad to, Paula. I'll say, though, the work in the call center is just so foundational to what I'm doing now. In my work with regulatory affairs, I think about how Vic and Alana both talked about some of the things that we're doing as far as the utility, whether it be vegetation management or looking at data on how we can better serve our customers. A lot of that right there has to, at some point, specifically we'll regulate utilities, it may lead to work with our regulators that regulate how we do business. And so as a regulatory affairs manager, I'm working very closely with our business partners to say, hey, as technology has evolved, I'll talk about smart meters, for example. With the evolution of smart meters and the deployment of smart meters, there are ways that we can better serve our customers with product and service offerings. And some of that requires regulatory approval from our regulators. Say, how can we better serve our customers as technology advances, and pulling together, working with our regulatory legal team. And we make filings to our regulators to say, hey, these right here are good investments. These are things how we're going to be able to better serve our customers, sometimes in a more timely manner. In a world where a lot of the rules that regulate our business are decades old and pretty, were not put in place in preparation for where we are today. So that right there is kind of a snapshot of regulatory affairs. The great part of what I do is that it touches almost every aspect of our business. So whether it be from our distribution team to our products and services team, I have an opportunity to provide support and get involved.
So I'm going to follow up on that and ask you, because I have you here. You said that working with customers in customer service was foundational. Why is that? Why is that foundational in terms of the work that you're doing?
That was foundational. It's just to understand our customers. I mean, everything we do is for our customers. And so what I find is right now over 20 my 8 years or so working on the phones with customers, working in process organizations within our customer service center, it makes you understand your customers, understand what they need. And I think it brings a very good perspective when you're talking about doing things today, even though it was so long ago, about putting your customers first, which is the core of our business.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Campos, you started in your opening remarks talking about the importance of diversity in the energy business in terms of national security. You talked a little bit about kind of the changing demographics of the country, the need for greater representation. Why don't you share with us a little bit about what your office is doing to kind of meet some of those goals and how you're able to support the industry and certainly our nation at large around diversity in energy?
Absolutely, Paula. And let me just tell everyone who's listening a little bit about the office. The office was created in 1979 during the oil embargo. It's a very unique office and one of a kind in federal government, in fact. It has titles that are similar to other offices you may encounter throughout the federal government, but we're the only office within the federal government that's congressionally mandated to do what we do. So what do we do? And how do we affect ultimately the positive outcome of inclusion? But one, we focus on diversity, as Paul has mentioned, but in education, business, as it concerns energy. We are also the Office of the EEO, Civil Rights, and Diversity and Inclusion within the department. My title is Director, Assistant Secretary, Chief Diversity Officer for the Department of Energy. So it's an all-encompassing sort of position as it concerns this area. Now, one thing that we've done, and Paul is very close to this as well with me, is something equity in energy. It's a unique initiative that was created about a year and a half ago and just launched in the month of October. And what we're doing with equity in energy consists of 5 pillars. 1 is STEM enhancement, 2 is technical assistance, 3 is supplier diversity, 4 is energy affordability, and 5 is workforce development. But central core to the theme is interest and access. It's creating interest within the minority communities, like I mentioned earlier, within the energy sectors. And then once creating that interest, it's then creating or building upon the existing access. That is crucial for our economy, for our national security. It's the interest. Often when I speak, and I spoke one time down south with Paula Glover, and I came from the audience and said, Director, we're just not very interested in this area. It's a misconception to many individuals, especially youth, on what energy is, especially within the minority communities. We have to infiltrate and do a better job in explaining what kind of great jobs within all the energy sectors, why it's important, why it's a really extremely viable and sustainable path towards what you're doing or towards what you want to succeed and go through in life, and why it's so important overall. So through equity in energy, we disseminate, we provide information, ambassadors, we have champions individuals that are heads of different offices within the Department of Energy. Ambassadors are chosen from experts outside stakeholders. We come together, we work on the 5 pillars. We have sub-pillars too, sub-pillars including artificial intelligence, biotechnology, formerly incarcerated persons, and entrepreneurialism. These are all important pillars and sub-pillars to increasing the participation and awareness. But again, I have to stress, it's about the interest and access, because the pillars will not work without creating the interest and access. And it's so vital for our economy. Again, I'll leave you with energy being our economy, the major portion of our economy, and it's what's going to propel us into the future. So what we do today with equity and energy, how we develop the 5 pillars, is going to mean a tremendous amount to so many of those minority communities.
Thank you, Director. So Vic, Hassan, and Ileana, all 3 of you, and what makes, I think, this panel particularly special, as someone who talks about diversity and energy way more than I would like, I've never had such a diverse panel as I have today. And so it's just really wonderful for me. But the 3 of you all talked about being immigrants. And oftentimes we talk about being an immigrant, meaning that there's a particular challenge or additional challenges that you may be facing because you're an immigrant, just as Kenisha and myself may be facing a different types of challenges as Black women. But I wonder if there are also some benefits or some special things that maybe the three of you bring in from your own unique personal experiences that your colleagues may not necessarily have. And I wondered if there's anything that you might want to share with us about either a unique challenge that you faced or, a different perspective or benefit that you face because you're an immigrant. And Vic, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, I'll be glad to share my experience. So I came to the U.S. From Vietnam at a very young age. And so obviously I didn't speak English. And so it kind of like forces me to like be adaptive. So I think that's one thing that being an immigrant can be a benefit in the workplace, especially like you are essentially equipped to take changes. Like you have to be able to change and adapt, and that's the one key thing in successes in business, right? You have to be able to adapt to change. Otherwise, you will be left behind. So I think like that's my experience. And another personal, example I can give is whenever I was in university, I actually declared energy management was my my major, but later on I switched. But whenever during my freshman year, I had a class and I was asking for a professor to say like, hey, can you basically be my point of reference? But the mistake that I made was that I emailed him. And so later on, he said, nobody asking for a reference with an email, you're supposed to come face to face, right? And then I did not know that because like no one have ever taught me I guess the etiquette. So therefore that's something that's like the challenges that I have to be able to learn and adapt on how the American work life or how things work in this country. So
that's actually an interesting and a great example. I think that there are probably a lot of people who do not know that you're supposed to ask for a reference face to face. So we're going to put that in our bucket of nuggets. Hassan, why don't you share either a particular challenge or maybe a little superpower that you have in your business having come from UAE, if that's the UAE, is that correct?
Yes, actually, I'm from Syria.
Okay.
But I lived half my life in Dubai. That's when I used to work in construction. So when I moved here, well, I do speak English, but it wasn't that good and still not really good. I still face some like hard time, trying to understand, other people. Mm-hmm. But especially when I went because I moved in 2018 in July, and in September, I went to the Lineman College in Florida through MEARS for the gas program. And that was like intense, but I learned so much about natural gas. And the most challenging thing was like when we are in a classroom and the instructor like talking about gas and everything, I have no idea what's going on because my English was, okay, I might have a conversation with you, but when it comes to like natural gas, I have no idea what's going on. So whatever they talk about, I try my best to write down everything. And then when we go to the field, that's when I understand actually this is what they were talking about. And then when I came back from Florida, after the program finished, I went back to Charlotte, MEARS, when I started like working in the field. That's when I faced a lot of difficulty understanding people. But it was fun that I could share part of my culture with my coworker. Mm-hmm. And no matter I have never been treated as an immigrant. They just I would say it was fun, and I do enjoy working with everyone. Doesn't it no matter what is your skin color or what you believe. But I've always been treated as a human being at MEARS. I mean, everywhere. And it took me like a little bit of time to understand what's going on around me. But yeah, right now I'm in a good space, and I understand what's going on. And yeah, I love what I do, and I just enjoy going to work every day. It's challenging and ever changing. That's what I like about it.
That's awesome.
I'm still learning about the culture, and I love the fact that everybody asks me about where I come from and what's my belief, and like culture, question about everything I do in my life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Ileana, in the role that you're in, I would guess that there are not a lot of women in your particular role in vegetation management. Would you mind sharing with us, so how have you been able to navigate that? And are there particular challenges or particular things, skills, or things that you can share with people that help you navigate a world where you may be the only woman?
That's a great question. And yes, I am oftentimes the only female, the only woman, the only Hispanic female in a group that I might be talking to, addressing, working with, or in the field. I will be happy to share that of my team, we're currently almost 20% women, which is great, right? The arboriculture industry is one that I find is a niche. It's a niche business, right? So there's an amazing amount of talent. Now, with regards to opportunities and overcoming, right? So my personality does not often allow for that to be a barrier. And if it appears as though it might be, I tend to address it head on and just say, hey, we're all here doing a job. We don't need to worry about any of the details, right? And I think that, I heard talking about the language barriers when they came in. I still make of myself. That's one thing that I think is really important that we do. Sometimes you'll hear me say, English is my second language. If I am at a loss for a term or a word, and it just lightens up situations, and it helps build a barrier, overcome any barriers.
Thank you so much. Kenisha, having had an opportunity to work in regulatory affairs a while ago, 20 years or so, my experience was that there were very few women who looked like you and I who were in that role. And I suspect there are some, but there probably aren't many. Why don't you share with us any unique challenges that you've faced or had to navigate in the role that you're in today, and even as you've made your journey through the industry?
Sorry about that. I was having trouble getting off of mute. But yeah, I'll be glad to address that. So you're right, Paula. I think just in the regulatory space, there's not a lot of people that look like you and I. And so one of the things that I've been able to do is, in navigating it, is there are a few, but building relationships with those individuals, even if they're not within my company, but in the industry. And so that right there, I've seen to have been very helpful from that standpoint. I think the other thing I would just say is just working in this space. Like I said, I started in the call center. Don't know about you when you worked in the business office, but that was very diverse, entry level, a lot more diversity there. And as I have taken on new roles and had new opportunities, the diversity level of the employees I work with have changed. Just depending on the role that I'm in. And then also the people that are at the table don't always look like you. But one of the things that I think that I've been committed to doing is always bringing my unique self to the table, understanding the value of the diversity of thought, the value of the experience that I bring to the table, and had to learn pretty early on, the best person that I can be at the table is Kenisha, and not trying to be somebody else. And that would be the value that my company's going to get, and then our customers at the end of the day as a result to what I'll add to it.
Director Campos, this is not a question that we've talked about, but I know it's a softball, so I know that you can answer it, even though it's going to sound like a little bit of a surprise. So you've now been in this role at the department for a little bit over 3 years, about that, a little bit over 3 years. I wondered if you could share with us, as you talked a little bit about this Equity and Energy program campaign that you rolled out. What has been the response from industry in terms of the work that you're trying to do to increase diversity?
Paula, good question, and thank you. It actually has been very, very positive throughout my travels. I have a unique opportunity in this job to travel the country in different parts and talk to different constituents, different associations, and different energy companies. And the overwhelming response has been very positive to what we're doing. I believe industry understands the importance of diversifying our workforce. They understand that security issue behind it. I believe they understand it's the right thing to do as well. And I believe they understand in including all of our talent in our country. And that includes all the different minority groups. And that's including increasing women participation within the energy industry. Everyone is acutely aware of how important it is. Everyone's also aware when we have a great economy, we have a lack of individuals entering the pipeline for these jobs. So it's very positive. They understand the importance. I haven't received any sort of backlash towards these sort of benchmarks that we're creating and these initiatives going forward. So it's been really a nice environment. But I think, again, and I would like to stress this, everyone understands the importance. And for the viewers and listeners, I think it's a great industry to enter in any of the energy sectors. It's just it's a vibrant economy, the energy economy, and it's going to be part of our life. As I mentioned on many times in my past speeches, energy is all around us while we're awake and while we're sleeping. And it's a big, big opportunity for all of us in minority communities to get more involved. And quite frankly, we need all the talent to be involved with an energy economy. Thank
you. Vic, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you champion diversity in your organization. What is it that you do and how your organization maybe supports some of the efforts that you take on to champion diversity, and even if that's diversity that's specific to Asian Americans?
Yes, I'll be happy to share that. So how I champion diversity is essentially having conversations with just everyday people. Just like what Hassan is saying, people are very interested to know the person, right? So, and diversity is such a big word, but it can be like a very simple word as well. So it just really be able to understand like different people, how their walk of life is different than you. And you won't know that until you ask questions. So just having conversations with people, having conversations about themselves, how their upbringing is, their family, and all of those things will essentially help the work relationship better too. Because if you understand the person, you can have a better working relationship with them. Because if something like that ticks them off, right? Then they're like, oh, that's probably because there might be a bias, a cognitive bias that they have, something unconscious or unconscious bias, I guess, that they have. And so with that, you are able to build better relationships. And specifically from a program perspective on diversity and inclusion at my company, we have a basically women in energy. So we encourage women to join women in energy, and we have meetings here and there. But I think those type of programs are really great, but people need to know each other on a personal level. And so that would, resonate with people more than just coming to a meeting and things like that. So.
Sure. So, Ileana, in response to a previous question, you said, you'll say sometimes that English is your second language as a way to almost kind of disarm people, to make people relax so that you can get about the business of what you're trying to accomplish. And I wondered if you could share with us, What other tools do you think that our listeners should maybe have in their toolkit, or things that people should be thinking about doing if they find themselves in a situation where they are the only person of color, the only woman, the only immigrant, whatever that dynamic is?
Paula, that's a good question. It's a hard question, right? Because in my mind, it just doesn't exist.
Okay.
If then I'm feeling it, right? So I accept my. So if English is my second language, or this, or it's more of that's reality, right? There's sometimes if I give acknowledgement or allow the diversity lens to cast a shadow of difference in a conversation, I think that I'm not, it doesn't allow for the equality and the respect that we are all deserving of. And I think that by just not even, it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't exist, and doesn't work its way into any conversations or any environments, or you don't allow it. Now, if I were to witness it happening, I would definitely address it, right? It would be more of a, we treat each other with respect, and I've only had that happen once in my career.
Where you saw someone else being treated, or you were being treated?
I saw someone else be treated in a manner that I did not feel was respectful. And I found that individual's immediate supervisor and addressed it with that person, and they took action immediately.
Kenisha, I'm going to ask you the same question. Thank you so much, Ileana. The same question for you. What special powers, tools would you suggest people have in their toolkit if they find that they're the only in a situation?
I think similar to Ileana is just being able to really address it head on. I mean, that's for me. I think that being confident and in yourself enough that you can stand up for yourself. Because I think that right there has to be the case. I think sometimes you find if that's not the case, people think that they can continue to do that. Thankfully, I work in a company where there is a culture of zero tolerance, but I think we also have to recognize that people bring themselves to who they are. And so even though in a company where there's zero tolerance, individuals may decide, hey, thankfully you had to deal with anything like that where, because of being an African-American woman, or African-American in general, that I've had to deal with that. But I do think that having the confidence to address it head on within your company and with the individual is going to be really key to ensuring that you mitigate that from being something that becomes the norm.
It looks like we probably have enough time for just a couple more questions. So the first question that I'm going to ask each of you to respond to is this. I like to say that the soft skills are the hard skills. So what is that soft skill that you would advise people who are joining us today to hone, no matter what they choose to do, so that, they have a really great work career? Kenisha, and you're on the big screen now, so I'm going to keep you there and you get to answer it first.
All right. I think being an active listener, and it's not always what people successful is active listening. From there, to me, you'll have the opportunity to learn a lot, and then look to help solve things for individuals.
Thank you. I'm looking at Ileana's response, so I'm going to let her go second. Ileana, what would be that skill for you?
Well, since Kenisha stole mine.
I kind of thought she did.
I'm going to have to go to the second one, which it kind of stems into active listening, is getting to know the whole person. Yeah. And try to understand where they come from. Right? Don't be quick to react to something that you don't necessarily agree with, sometimes there's a question that I ask myself often, which is, what was the cause that led to this consequence, right? How did they get here? What in life, what in their journey, what along the path of even an analysis was the cause that led to a consequence? And understanding the whole person will then help you continue to help them in their journey, right? I'm big on employee development, and I always tell my team that my job is to help them realize their full potential and their career desires. And that is like something that's one of the first things I tell anybody who joins my team or anything like that, right? So it really is about just getting to know the whole person so that you can help them realize their full potential. And as a result, right, from a work product, you just have a more engaged employee.
That's a great one. Hassan, what little nugget would you like to leave us with a special skill that we should be honing in our toolkit?
Well, I'll say communication. Communication for me is a great skill that leads you to be a great, I'll say from worker to like the highest position in your career, because communication, it's actually communicate with everyone about the very small details to the biggest one we have, especially when you work in gas. And asking question, observing, looking, like watching what's going on. That's exactly like how I do invest in myself.
That's a good one.
Everyone, yes.
Communication, observing and listening, and asking questions when you need to ask questions. Those are all really, really good ones.
There's nothing wrong with asking questions.
Yeah, there's no bad question.
That's
Gotta
right.
ask. Director Campos, the soft
Yes,
stuff
ma'am.
is the hard stuff. What's a special skill? I mean, here you come from Las Vegas. I know that. I don't know that our audience knows that, to run a pretty significant office in the government. How do you do that? What is that soft skill that you really need to hone?
You know what? And I just want to just say that what the panelists have said so far, I absolutely agree with. Communication. The one side being a great listener, part of communication, but also being a reactor. When you're listening and you're gathering information, how do you then react? But for my input as well, and it's not so much a soft skill, and it's not so much even innate. And for some, it's innate, but it's curiosity. Is to always have strong curiosity. Curiosity, they say, killed the cat and so forth. But in this case, professionally speaking, your curiosity really helps you understand. It's just like it was just mentioned before about the oil and gas industry. But when you're curious, you learn. And when you're curious, you ask the questions. And when you're curious, you become a better professional. So I think as far as I'm concerned, my curiosity has led me to far greater heights than anything else I could possibly have achieved without it. So it's curiosity, it's a willingness to learn, and it's keeping your mind open. So I think that's my soft skill in a sense of the day.
That's actually a really, really good one. Vic, you're last, but certainly not least, but we got some good ones here. So what's number 5? What are you going to offer us?
I think humility. It's because, I don't think anyone like a person with a big head, right? So be able to admit that you're wrong and there's someone better than you. Be hungry about knowledge, have that curiosity. It's because you have to continue to learn. Otherwise, you're not going to be, you could be good at this moment in time, but things change, right? So if you're able to be humble and admit that you don't know everything and be hungry enough that you can learn those things, you'll be great.
That's awesome. So I'm going to repeat for our audience all of your skills because they're all fantastic. Humility, curiosity / being a lifelong learner. I'm going to add that for you, Director Campos. Being an active listener, getting to know the whole person, that's really, really strong. And then communication. And so we have time for one last question, one that none of you knew was coming, but I think it is a softball, which is this. You are all clearly very enthusiastic about the work that you do in the industry that you work in. And so the question for you, Vic, I'm going to start with you because you are in the big screen, which is why energy? Why work in energy?
I think there's a lot of potential in this industry. I actually didn't know about this industry, say 5-ish years ago. I was just looking for a job and here it found me. And since then, I found there's tremendous opportunity in this industry. It's growing. The energy infrastructure and the footprint is changing. So it's very exciting. It can be, leading edge because, I think like Ileana mentioned earlier, this is like life sustaining. Like you have to have energy in order for that, right? If, say, for example, your power go out in 5 minutes, people will notice that, right? There's not a lot of things that people will actually notice that it's gone for, like, say, 2 seconds, for example. So I think it's very exciting industry to be in. A lot of opportunities, and there's tons of potential, especially for diversity candidates, because the industry itself is not very diverse. So use that to the best of your ability. I mean, use that as a pro, right? I mean, So use it to your advantage. So that's my why.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, listen, I don't know. I would want what you're drinking. You're so enthusiastic. That's awesome. Kenisha, 20 years in, why energy? You must like it. You spent 20 years with us.
Yes, I do like it. I think it's the diversity of the work. I mean, to me, you can learn every skill. I mean, we touch on everything, but I think just like what Big said is it is vital to mankind. I mean, what we do is really empowering lives, and there are very few industries that you can be a part of that you can say it touches in every aspect of life, residential, non-residential. And so if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, people notice it immediately. So just being a part of that is, I find, fulfilling.
Awesome. Hassan? Why energy?
Well, curiosity. This is first. I always want to know how gas gets to customers. That's a passion. And I chose this career because it's been 2 years and I'm still learning every day. I have a crew and we still all together learning how the gas actually get to the house. And how we do that every day. And that's really challenging. And that's what I like to do every day. I like to challenge myself. And there's a lot of potential in natural gas as well. And yeah, I enjoy doing this every day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And Ileana, you're going to get the last word. Why energy?
Okay, so thank you. For me, initially it was service and giving back to the community. But I think I want to share something that was shared with me by a great leader I worked for. I asked him the question one time. I said, why energy? What brought you into this space? And he said that when he also immigrated into this country, and he says that the first time he was on a plane, shortly after he came to this country, they were landing at nighttime, and he looked out the window and he saw the lights. And that day he looked down and said, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. I want to be part of what makes the world go round, right? So that to me was very, very impactful. And every time I'm on a plane at nighttime now, I look out the window and look at what we do every day has a little bit of a nugget and contribution to making sure those lights stay on.
Thank you so much. And so we are out of time. I'm going to invite our audience to give you all a virtual hand clap. So this is me saying thank you. You guys have been awesome. Thank you. I've learned, I mean, I've been in this business almost 30 years and I've learned something from all of you. So I really, when I say thank you, it is so heartfelt. Ileana, Hassan, Kenisha, Vic, and Director Campos, thank you so much for being here. So while this session is over, the information and opportunities at Energy 2020, Energy Careers 2020 continues. Please take the time to visit our exhibit hall, talk with the companies, learn more about industry-related jobs and the internship opportunities. And you can also visit our chat rooms and connect with other industry ambassadors who will also answer your questions. Thank you all for being with us, and I wish you all a great day.